So there's this idea that you need to kind of write down. Sometimes we're going to face the unknown. Things are going to happen that we didn't anticipate. And as we mention all the time, when that happens, and it's not one of these things if it happens, it is when it happens, you only have two choices. We talk about it all the time. You either trust God, move forward and continue to serve, or you blame God and then you get angry. And then after you get angry, you get discouraged. And then after discouraged, there's depression. And then after depression is despair. It is a spiral that continues. We've seen it in the scripture. We often use Job as an example. You just have to go to that book and you watch him go to each one of those steps. And then when he finally gets to despair, that is the danger spot. Because if you remember, he says, I wish I'd never been born. We saw the same thing in Elijah, sliding down that scale. He wished the same thing. And so here, Paul doesn't know it, but he's setting the story for us in chains. Wow, things don't go as I expected them to go. You have to understand that because your life might not go exactly as you wished it would. All right, let's move ahead. Chapter 25, beginning in verse 13. And we'll read this passage, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of pick it apart a little bit. Here we go. 25, beginning in verse 13. So, a few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived to Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, "There is a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders and the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them that it is not the Roman custom to hand over any man before he has faced his accusers and has had an opportunity to defend himself against their charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus, whom Paul claimed was alive." You like the sound of that? My friends, there are some people today still think that he's a dead man named Jesus. Did you know he's alive today? Thank you, Deb. It's another thing in a small church. You know when the amens are shouting out. George, let me hear it. Thank you. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters, so I asked if he'd be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial there on these charges. When Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "I would like to hear this man myself." He said, "Tomorrow you will hear him." So here we have this big, long backstory to just get to the point where the king is interested. Maybe I want to hear a little bit about this. It reminded me that in this world there is an interest, a mild curiosity about the things of God. People are often talking about him. And as I looked at that, I thought, we know exactly what Paul's going to do in a few moments. He's going to use this as an opportunity. And so the lesson for us is use that curiosity. Find ways to engage in conversations. At your work, people are willing to talk about anything. They'll talk about sports. They go crazy during the football season talking about things. People are willing to talk about those things. You should be willing to talk about your thing. What'd you do this weekend? You're not going to believe this. I was at church on Saturday morning. We did a work day, and we were throwing this way. We were painting, doing all this stuff, and they'll look at you. On a Saturday, you gave up a Saturday morning? Yeah, I love my little church. Use those conversations to share your faith. Remember what I say all the time. Why do you think he left you here? Right? You got to let that sink in. He left you here to tell the world his story, and so you have to use these opportunities to talk about him. So what might happen in those conversations? Back up a little bit to chapter 23. Sometimes if you are engaged in conversation, you might find that you have to defend your faith. Now, the general rule of thumb is just stick to the story. Don't get dragged down rabbit holes. Try to avoid arguing. Just talk about your faith, about what Jesus has done for you personally. But sometimes you have to, and here we have Acts chapter 23 in verse 9, there's this dispute going on. And verse 9 says, there was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man. There are times when you have to stand up and you have to defend your faith. Now, you're probably thinking, well, maybe not so much in this day and age, and I say it's exactly the opposite. Because with this little invention called the internet, you've heard of that, right? People have the ability to post just about anything.